What is going on, everyone? Lauren Sisler here with AL.com, hanging out with my man, Z-Man, Matt Zenitz. He's our insider, always got the scoop on everything going on, and we're gonna talk about a few select players with Alabama. And we went to the polls. We asked our viewers who were they most interested in hearing more about what their sort of rating is going into this 2020 football season, and where do they kind of stack up. And so the guys that I guess we got most from the polls, we got Trey Sanders, John Mechi, Christian Barmore, and Bryce Young, of course. Bryce Young, I mean, that's an obvious one, right? But we'll start at the top of that list with Trey Sanders. Obviously with the top returning rushers that you have in Najee Harris, you've got Brian Robinson and Keelan Robinson all returning, obviously, this year, and then Trey Sanders, a guy that redshirted, obviously hurt his ankle last year. Some of the expectations that you have for him and what you think he is going to be able to accomplish, is he going to be able to get in this rotation with some of these other guys that are coming back?
I would think he would, and I think he would have been in the rotation last year if he hadn't have gotten hurt. So he suffered the unfortunate foot injury during the course of preseason camp last year. If that hadn't have happened, I think that Trey would have been a factor in that running back rotation to go along with specifically Najee Harris and Brian Robinson. He was somebody who was doing good things and made a good early impression at Alabama, and then unfortunately suffered that injury that prevented him from being able to play last season. But is at a point now where obviously has been recovering from that injury, and I think will be in a spot where he will very much be a factor when it comes to that competition for playing time at running back.
So, with the running back rotation in terms of, this offense and getting those guys back, I mean, I think that, all in all, Alabama, there were some wins for Alabama in terms of guys they brought back that didn't go to the NFL draft. Look, Alabama's always having
to a big one.
Rinse and repeat, right? Yep, yeah. Najee Harris being a big one. And so to see, some of these other guys that are going to have a chance to kind of be in that, maybe 2-3 spot, 3-4 spot kind of thing down the line. Certainly I think he has when healthy, has an opportunity to contribute to the team.
Well, the cool thing is, so they go from a situation, I think most teams would be envious, even like taking Najee out of the picture. So let's say Najee moves on, goes to the NFL. Most teams around the country would be very happy to have Brian Robinson as part of a group that also includes Trey Sanders, a former 5-star kid, Keelan Robinson, absolutely, who did some good things last year, and as Coach Saban has talked about a lot, has some juice at the running back position. But for Alabama now, you have one of the top running backs in the country coming back to go along with a group that had some talented guys within it also to give them really a position of strength at running back. And the cool thing about Najee had elevated his stock at the end of the year. So working against Najee when it came to the NFL draft part of it is at the time that he made his decision, it looked like it was going to be a really deep group of running backs, which when you're dealing with the NFL draft, when you're competing with a really deep position group, it can lead to guys going a little bit down in the draft compared to where they would typically go if the draft wasn't as deep at that position, something that guys like Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs could maybe deal with this year, considering it's a really deep receiver class. But that was something that I know was brought up to Najee's side during the course of that period, and Najee made the business decision that even with how he ended the year, which, I mean, he played his best at the end of the season, had a good game against Michigan, and really that second half of the year had a lot of big games, including against teams like LSU and all, made the decision to come back, and is somebody who I expect will be in the mix for maybe the Heisman Trophy this year, just if he's able to follow up what he did at the end of last season, but obviously did some really good things, and I know Alabama is in a better position because of him being there. And
absolutely, yeah, it kind of sets that bar and sets that tone. Now, John Mechi, speaking of the wide receiving core, a 5-star receiver that comes in, you have Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle returning, so do you foresee John Mechi being a guy that can maybe fill in that third spot and sort of that rotation of receivers that we saw, kind of that fabulous four, I like to call them, the fabulous four at Alabama? Obviously, two of them have, entered into the NFL draft. But do you think Mechi has a good shot at potentially being that, number 3 guy, that impact player for Alabama?
Yeah, so you go from the fabulous 4 down to 2 guys that are really good and potential first-round draft picks. But I would say John Mechi is probably the favorite at this point to be the number 3 receiver to go along with Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. And there will be other players competing for playing time within that receiver group also, and for that number 3 spot, specifically like Slade Bolden, you have Tyrell Shavers in there, and then Xavier Williams to go along with that. But I would say that it's probably fair to pinpoint John Mechi as the favorite going into the spring for that number 3 receiver spot. Got some playing time last year, not a ton by any means, which when you're dealing with a group that talented with the top 4, it's kind of tough for other guys to get in the mix and get significant playing time to go along with them, but they get some playing time last year, and more so than anything else, it was during the build-up to the season where he really made a name for himself. So during some of those preseason scrimmages, made some big plays, got people's attention, and will be in a position now going into the spring where he has a real opportunity to get on the field and play a significant role.
So the guy getting the ball to the receivers, Mr. Bryce Young. Of course, everybody wants to talk about Bryce Young. You have Tua Tagovailoa obviously going to NFL, entering the NFL draft, and certainly, will be missed, and obviously the talent around him speaks volumes. So can Bryce Young accomplish much of the same of what Tua Tagovailoa was able to do early in his career? We know that Nick Saban is not shying away from starting freshmen. Mm-hmm. That's no longer an issue or really up for debate. So pretty much you have Mac Jones in the mix, right? So you have a guy that's tested and proven, had one of his best outings against Michigan in the bowl game. Mm-hmm. Got thrown into the mix, obviously, throughout the year when Tua went down, but then really sort of had, the job was his, and he showed up when he needed to, and despite the Iron Bowl being, that wasn't all on him, right? So with that being said, you have Mac Jones, you obviously have Tua's younger brother, Talia, and then Bryce Young. So with that being said, do you think Bryce Young, what are the chances of him coming in and truly being named starting quarterback, if not in the early parts of fall, 1, 2, 3 games into the season? Because we obviously saw that with Tua and Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, well, if I were people, I wouldn't write off Mac Jones at this point. So Mac got his opportunity at the end of last year, and simply put, exceeded my expectations for him. So made some mistakes during the course of the Auburn game, but at the same time, if you look at what he did aside from those 2 mistakes, which obviously were big mistakes, but threw for 335 against one of the better defenses in the country. I can't remember the exact amount of touchdown passes, but I feel like it was 3-4 touchdown passes or whatever it was, but led Alabama to a lot of success offensively against one of the better defenses in the country in a place that is very tough to play as an opposing quarterback. So that stood out, and then followed it up with a solid, respectable performance against Michigan. He's put himself in a position now that, as talented as Bryce Young is, and I've heard nothing but positive things about Bryce, who has gotten to Alabama, has put on some weight, which is important to him, and just a kid who obviously is extremely talented, which I think anybody that looks at his recruiting rating can get a feel for just how talented this kid is. But based on how Mac finished the year, Mac is in a position where he is the leader in that competition going into the spring. And once again, people should not be writing him off at this point, and definitely earn some trust with the coaching staff based on how he finished the year. Yeah,
and I don't think there's anything wrong with having a quarterback competition going in, into spring, obviously into fall. I certainly think that, it's a great opportunity for, all 3 quarterbacks to get in the mix, see what they can bring to the table. And to your point, don't write Mac Jones off. I think that, to some degree, everybody's putting a lot of chips in this one basket. The blue chip quarterback, right? Bryce Young coming over, obviously the dual threat, just the athleticism that he brings to the table. So how well does that fit into this offensive system? And again, Nick Saban talked about Bryce Young, just somebody that, I love this guy. Nick Saban doesn't profess his love for people all too often.
And so a really talented kid that put up some tremendous numbers in one of the toughest leagues in the country from a high school standpoint. A really talented kid. And once again, just looking at it from a recruiting ranking standpoint, this is one of the top recruits that they've gotten in Alabama under Nick Saban.
Right.
And I want to say far and away the highest rated quarterback that they've gotten at Alabama under Nick Saban. It ended up the recruiting cycle as, I want to say, the number 2 overall player in the class. It's just a special kid that I understand why people are excited. But again, the mistake that some people are making is just at this point already writing off Mac Jones. And I will say, I will be shocked if this competition is decided at any point before fall camp. This isn't like it's just going to be done at the end of spring. But going into the spring, again, Mac is going to be that number 1 guy going into this portion of the year, and it will very much be the leader in the competition going into the beginning of spring practice, obviously coming up in a couple weeks now.
Very soon, y'all. Okay, last guy that was of interest from our viewers, Christian Barmore, the defensive tackle. Look, I mean, his stature speaks for itself, 6'5", 310 pounds. And I think he's a guy that kind of flies under the radar a little bit. But last year he saw some playing time, didn't crack the 2 deep. Do you think that's going to change this year? Do you expect to see him possibly in that 2 deep coming out of fall camp?
So he ended up working his way into the 2 deep throughout the course of the year and became a rotational player for them because they wanted to find a way to utilize his ability as a I guess
I should say
rusher.
A mainstay in the 2 deep is maybe what I should rephrase that. But somebody that you're going to see in the 2 deep every single week coming out of fall camp.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a big factor in the competition for playing time along the defensive line. So you lose Raekwon now, obviously, but one of the things that they love about Christian Barmore is his ability to be disruptive and generate pressure as a pass rusher, which he showed the capability to do last year, and that's something that they'll look to continue to utilize this season.
And obviously with the defense, that was a big area of concern for this Alabama football team. And so with the guys coming back and obviously the injuries, that's going to be a huge part of it. So getting guys healthy and certainly being able to get that communication and all the things that you've sort of heard in recent headlines of the lack of communication. And these are the things that need to be fixed on the defensive side of football.
One of the things you'll love about Christian Barmore, though, they love him from a personality standpoint. So similar to Lauren Sisler being like our big personality, Christian Barmore is apparently one of the big personalities inside the Alabama locker room. Very popular inside the locker room, but to go along with that, one of the things most important, production on the football field, and he showed the capability last year to be productive, especially from a pass rushing standpoint.
So you're drawing comparisons to me and
I am. So you and Christian Barmore, is that the first time that you've been compared to Christian Barmore?
It is. It is the first time. It's actually the first time I've been compared to an Alabama
I try to come up with
player.
new stuff. I try to
Thank
be
you.
creative
and
innovative in my thinking.
I feel good about that. Do you think maybe as we get into talking about the NFL Combine and who you felt stock maybe rose, who impressed you, who didn't impress you, do you think maybe like I could fall under the wings of Mr. Henry Ruggs, who had the fastest 40 time? Can I be compared to him? Like I'm kind of lightning fast.
I wouldn't be compared to Henry Ruggs. So I try to hold my own when it comes to like a lifting standpoint, but running wise, I'd probably get lapped by like Henry Ruggs, maybe even like Jedrick Wills at this one. I don't know. Jedrick would be one of the guys that stuck out to me. So one of the questions that I had gotten from NFL people, from NFL scouts related to Jedrick, big physical guy, but questioned the overall athleticism to the point that one had compared him to Cody Ford, who was a rookie last year with the Buffalo Bills, was a second-round pick coming out of Oklahoma. Well, one of the concerns for Cody coming out of college was athleticism and being slated or limited to maybe being just perceived as a right tackle, and that was one of the things with Jedrick, just how athletic is he really? Are there some limitations there athletically, and is this guy capable of playing left tackle? And what he showed at the Combine is that he's a better athlete probably than I realized, and maybe even more so than what some NFL people realized also. So he goes out, 40-yard dash, vertical jump, and I want to say broad jump, tested out among the 6 best offensive linemen there at the Combine related to those drills. I know with the 40, his 40 time, and maybe you can pull it up. But I want to say it was like tied for 6th best or something like that.
5:05?
Yeah, 5:05, which is a good time. But I think it was like tied for 6th best among offensive linemen. The vertical jump was like 2nd best. It's like a 34.5-inch vertical jump. And then the broad jump also was one of the better broad jumps among offensive linemen. So showed some of that athleticism that I think will help his cause when it comes to being a very high draft pick.
Anybody that, I guess, from that standpoint on the other side of things that a little lackluster, maybe not what you expected, didn't really show out the way that you would have hoped for?
I don't know if I'd necessarily put anybody in that category. I mean, some of the guys obviously didn't go through all the drills that you have.
So it's a little, I would say the perception of it can be a little bit skewed because not everybody was healthy enough to be able to.
So if all those guys had gone through drills, I think we would probably have a better gauge on that one. But I mean, you have Terrell Lewis who didn't run the 40. Anthony Jennings didn't run the 40. Xavier McKinney didn't have a chance to go through drills because hurt himself while running the 40. Shaheem Carter didn't run the 40, and then Trayvon Diggs the same thing. So I think we would have a better feel on
so
whether...
like, if you hurt yourself in the middle of these drills, how does that hurt you in terms of stock? I mean...
So Xavier going into the Combine was viewed, I want to say across the board, as the number one safety in this year's class. I think that changes, and I think NFL people will be curious to see how he does. day now, but I mean, even his 40 time getting hurt towards the end of the run, it's not like that 40 time in itself would hurt him. It was somewhere in like the low 4.6 range or whatever. So hey, he's still fine, and he's definitely not a guy that I would put in the category of having hurt himself at the combine, even getting hurt. So didn't hurt himself from a stock standpoint, even though he got hurt physically.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and obviously the clarification, because sometimes it makes you wonder, like, you know, what's the stamina, what's their abilities. Obviously, you know, they go out there and get hurt, you tweak something, but it's so easy to do, a lot easier than you would think with some of these quick twitch movements and things that you're going out there. And, you know, it's unfortunate. I hate it when these kids go out here and they train, and then obviously, you know, all lights are on them, you know, national TV, and boop. All right, lastly.
The biggest deal, just to add one more thing in, I would probably say for Alabama, related to Alabama guys, the biggest deal was probably the Tua medical situation and just everything looking as good as possible from a medical standpoint. It seems like the feedback coming out of the combine was that things were positive and encouraging from a medical standpoint for Tua. But related to guys hurting themselves, I would say one of the biggest questions moving forward, because we haven't gotten an answer on this at this point, is what did the medical show related to Terrell Lewis? So Terrell's another kid that has had an injury history throughout the course of his time at Alabama, and I know from several NFL people that is a significant question mark and concern when it comes to Terrell, who's been talked about as a potential early round draft pick. But if those medicals pop up with some red flags, that could lead to him dropping, which obviously has happened with guys in the past. They're very talented, but teams are concerned based on the medicals, and it leads to those guys falling in the draft. And I'm curious to see if the same kind of thing could potentially happen with Terrell. And once again, we have not gotten really any information at this point on just what those medicals showed with him.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving on to our last topic that we talked about. You've obviously been covering the story for really since it broke. Part of breaking news, obviously, with Scott Cochran leaving to go to Georgia. You've been on that story from day one, and my question for you is, they obviously made their hires. David, is it?
Ballou.
Ballou, okay. Ballou, yeah. So David Ballou and Matt Ray. Matt Ray. Yeah. See, look, that's what I need this guy here for. So
David Ballou, who's much bigger than I am, by the way. Former Indiana fullback.
Okay. Gotcha.
Stocky, it looks like he's capable of putting up a lot more weight than I am in the weight room.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe we'll have to see if that. Maybe we'll get.
Got that nice scientific approach in there. So,
I was going to say. So that's my question for you. Just knowing the background of these two guys, where they come from, sort of what their resume is. I mean, do you see a shift in sort of where Alabama's going with these two guys and sort of what they hope to accomplish? Do you expect a lot to change in the program? Scott Cochran was there for all 13 years with Nick Saban. Do you expect to see a big shift? Do things change substantially with these two guys?
I think it will. And even if Scott was back, I think there were some adjustments and tweaks that Coach Saban wanted to make from a strength and conditioning standpoint. Those conversations had taken place.
Do you think that's includes nutrition as well as
I think this is limited to strength and conditioning, just in terms of what I'm talking about. Just the overall approach, that there were some concerns there and some adjustments and tweaks that Coach Saban would have wanted to make, even if Scott was back as strength and conditioning coach. But to me, this ends up being a win-win situation. So Scott has talked to people close to him for a long time about wanting to eventually become a head coach. And obviously the natural next step in that process for him was to go from being a strength and conditioning coach to being an on-the-field guy. So he gets that opportunity now under a close friend of his, Kirby Smart, at Georgia, at a highly respected school in Georgia. And for Alabama, it seems like Coach Saban had wanted to transition to more of a scientific cutting-edge approach, and he's bringing in two guys that are extremely respected that, I mean, when you think of the scientific cutting-edge approach, they very much fall into that category. But talking to people in the strength and conditioning world, these guys are very good at what they do, and this part shocked me. So Indiana football, you don't exactly think of a powerhouse when it comes to football, but the Indiana football strength and conditioning staff was one of the highest paid strength and conditioning staffs in the country for football, and maybe even the highest paid, and these guys were the reason why, and kind of shows just the value that they have, because they had been bumped up in pay just based on the interest that they were getting from other places, to the point that David Ballou last year was making $400,000, which ranked among the top 15 nationally for strength and conditioning coaches in itself. But then to go along with that, Matt Ray was making close to $400,000 also, acting as like the speed guy / sports science guy, and it just shows the value and respect that these guys have.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So certainly great insight. We appreciate you obviously covering the story, from top to bottom and continuing to keep us updated. We know that was a, big news, obviously breaking news, to the Alabama fan base, to the minds of many, to even the players and obviously those within the program. So again, we appreciate the insight, all the stuff on Alabama, and of course, Matt Zenitz, he's doing big things. So you can always check him out, all his stuff, Twitter, follow him, Zenitz, he's cool. I'm cool too.
Well, most of all, I need to get
cool.
with David Ballou in the weight room.
Cool.
David Ballou would help me get to a different level in the weight room. So
David Ballou, you hear that?
That's the top goal for me right now.
Calling you out. Let's go. All right, buddy, we appreciate it. Thanks, Eunice, so much. We're peacing out here on the Touchback. We'll see you back here next week.